Now I've secured the engine to my workbench, and I've used a couple of straps, one over the center and one over the back, to stabilize it. And it wants to tip forward, so I put a 2x4 that just fits under the front here. That keeps it from tipping forward. And there's a slight slope to the oil pan at the rear, so I have a little shim piece of wood that I stuck under it. So everything's nice and stable, and it won't go anywhere while I work on it. The other thing I do is rotate the motor so the flywheel is at top dead center. Before I remove the clutch, since I'm going to be replacing it, I thought I'd show you all the parts and use the new clutch to illustrate. This is the pressure plate, this is the clutch disc, and this is the housing, and that's the diaphragm spring. Now, something you'll notice is that there's a paint mark right here on the pressure plate, and there's a paint mark right here on the housing. Now, those are heavy marks, meaning they're the heavy part, and when they go together, you want to offset them, and you'll notice there's 3 pins, so the pressure plate can mount to the cover. That means each of these is a 120-degree offset. So when I put the pressure plate on the cover, I want to make sure the paint mark is either over on this pin or on this pin, because this is the pin that has the paint mark. Now, the way it goes together is the little arms swing out, and the center pin here goes on, the center hole here goes on the pins, and the clutch disc with the friction material goes on. Now, that's my heavy mark, so I'm going to put this over that way, so I'm 120 degrees out, and then I rotate the arms a little bit just to get everything to line up. And it's always a little bit of finagling, but there we go. Now, on the clutch disc, which has the friction material, this face is flush with the plate, and this edge of the pressure plate is what goes against the flywheel, so that's to the front of the engine. And then on this side, the clutch disc has a raised section. That's what faces you when you're looking at the back of the engine. So that's how it all goes together. Now, one other part is the diaphragm spring, which is this piece, and it's going to fit up against the flywheel, and you'll see it's kind of bowed, which is where the spring action comes from. So it will fit like that with the bowed area inside, just like that. Now, you'll notice that here on the housing is a white mark, and I showed you the white marks on the new parts. So that's a balancing mark. And what's also on this down here, you can see, is another white mark on the flywheel. So this on the housing is 120 degrees from that mark on the flywheel, because that's the heavy part of the flywheel. And then the pressure plate mark is going to be over here. So each of them, when you put it together properly, is 120 degrees apart. Now, the clutch assembly is held on by 6 Allen bolts, and there's 2 ways you can take those off. One is to use a little impact driver. Make sure it's running in reverse, and that's the quick way. Backs it off, and then what I do is I just finger tighten it, and then go get the next one. And that one came all the way out. But I'll tighten it back on again because I want to relieve the pressure on the diaphragm spring. I want to relieve that gently. So I loosen them and go all the way around. Now the second technique is to take a screwdriver, and there's teeth on the flywheel, and it's a big blade. I slide it in between the teeth to stabilize the flywheel, and then I can use my ratchet and I can undo the bolt and hold the flywheel. There it goes. There we go. And you can do it either way, but like I say, using the impact driver is pretty quick. Now that I have loosened all 6, I just go in and back each of them out about a turn. And that takes the pressure off the diaphragm spring gently. I just walk my way around. And then they'll all feel pretty loose when the pressure's off the spring. Then I can just take them all out. I'm actually going to leave that one in for a second just so the whole clutch assembly can hang on that one bolt. Makes it a little easier. Now it'll be, I can get it to slide if I just wiggle it a little, I think. Got one side to slide. And you may want to use a little bit of some force on the edge with a screwdriver, but if you do that, you want to be very careful that you don't hurt the casting here on the edge of the bell housing, because that will screw up getting the transmission to align with the engine. So what I do is make up a sandwich of 2 or 3 popsicle sticks, lay it on the side, and then I can get my screwdriver in behind the cover, and it slid it all free. And now I can back this last bolt out, and the whole clutch pack comes out. Now behind it is the diaphragm spring, and that just slides right off. And as you can see, there's a certain amount of junk on the flywheel.